Welcome to the Construction Disruption Podcast, where we uncover the future of design, building, and remodeling.
I'm Todd Miller of Isaiah Industries, manufacturer of specialty metal roofing and other building materials. Today, my co-host is Ryan Bell. Ryan, welcome to this episode. How you doing?
Hey, Todd. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well also. Lots of exciting things, and we're in the midst of an exciting season in the construction industry. And as always, we have another great guest here on the show. Also, as typically always, we are doing challenge words. So for the audience, that means that each of us on the show have been given a special word by one of the others, or maybe a phrase, to work into the conversation somehow. You can be listening for strange things we may say, and at the end, we will announce whether we were successful in using our challenge words or not. So Ryan, you good to go?
Yes, let's get started.
So today, we're taking a look at some folks who have found and created a very unique solution to our nation's housing shortage and really the world's housing shortage. And what's more, what they have developed is something that everyone in our audience really could be a part of. We are talking today with Aleksandr Gampel, co-founder of Cuby Technologies. Alex, welcome to Construction Disruption.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I think these conversations, this dialogue, it's important to progress our industry. So appreciate you guys having smart folks and interesting people to make everyone in the industry aware of what's to come.
Well, I'll tell you the thing I love most about the show is I always learn something. And so I'm looking forward to learning from you today. So before we kind of dig into Cuby Technologies and what you've developed there, I'm just kind of curious, could you give us a little bit of a background on how you view both the shortage of housing and the shortage of construction workers in the United States and, what the impact of those shortages is having that caused you to go out and develop Cuby Technologies?
Yeah, for me, it's super personal. I come from a real estate family, so I've touched real estate my entire career, most of my life. Starting with Legos and always looking at the buildings as a kid. So I love the built environment. I love the idea that four walls shape, essentially our lives. It's the backdrop to our lives. It's where we would live. It's where we work. It's where we play. Generally, construction is the most vital sector to any economy. It's generally the biggest for most countries, employs the most people. So it's a vital sector. Housing has been in the headlines nonstop for the last several years. The debate was a couple nights ago that was very much talked about. Housing is an important issue for first world countries. You can't be a superpower if a lot of folks can't afford to rent or acquire a home. And that's partly why we have household formation decline and why folks are delaying having kids. So it stems into really, really big problems that have the potential to compound. Why are we building less homes? Folks have different theses around this. We think it's, bureaucratic, and the pre-development process required to go build a home takes a long time, is expensive, it's a hindrance to a developer's job, etc. But we think it's really tied to the idea that young people don't want to be construction workers. It's evident. You show up on a construction site, average age is 40 to 50 years old. That's kind of wild considering how intense and dangerous and physically labor intensive the industry is. So we think it's really due to a shortage of the fact that, like I said, young people don't want to be construction workers. So we're trying to do something about it. We want to figure out how we can go build more homes with fewer hands, essentially. That's the premise of what we've built. For me, it's kind of a random and non-linear path as to how I got here, but it really had to do with the idea that I was able to go develop a lot with a lot of partners, and we were running into a constraint, which was not capital. It was not deal flow. It was hiring GCs and subcontractors. That's when I first was exposed to this labor issue.
Very interesting. And, the other thing I think it's kind of goes along with that and is very interesting is that recent years where other than the blip caused by COVID, we've had really relatively very low unemployment rates. I think that kind of highlighted this shortage of workers, but I think you hit the root cause nail on the head there in that this really started when unemployment was, 5, 6, 7%. We simply saw fewer and fewer people wanting to enter the skilled trades. And it's interesting. Our guest next week is going to be talking about a solution to training and trying to elevate the skilled trades a little bit as well. But I love what you're doing by recognizing the connection of that labor shortage with the housing and construction shortage, figuring out how can we address both at the same time. So my understanding is, what Cuby Technologies has put together is a combination of software and hardware that allows you to sell folks mobile micro-factories for resilient homes. Is that kind of how you would describe it, or is there a different way you would describe it?
Over the course of years, we've iterated how we talk about the business. And I think, as a one-liner, it's the most concise to say that we design, we develop, we deploy mobile microfactories that then manufacture and assemble homes for the masses. I think that's an easy understanding of what we do. It's not easy on the back end to make it work and to be able to replicate. In the future, we're hoping to do about 275 mobile microfactories, but the essence of what we've done is we figured out a way how we can apply Toyota's production system, or I guess more famously known, Henry Ford's assembly line, to construction in a way that historically industrialized construction has not been able to make work. We think the way to do that is not a centralized gigafactory. We think it's about decentralizing manufacturing and putting up a network of smaller footprint, lower capex factories that then manufacture and also have the capability to vertically integrate and assemble the kit of parts that those factories are capable of producing, turning that into a home, requiring less skilled labor, which in turn reduces cost, which is generally the most expensive variable in that dollar that it costs someone to build a home.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, I think, especially the decentralization and sort of regionalization of what you're doing makes a lot of sense. So I'm kind of curious. Tell us a little bit about the equipment, the hardware, the equipment that is required to run these factories. How much space does it take? I'm kind of curious, too. What are the raw materials? Are you building the homes out of conventional raw materials, or are there some new materials being used as well?
Yeah, I'll sound like a broken record across the different mediums that we talk about our business, but it's really anchored in 3 pillars, which I think touch some of what you're asking. One, we talked about it's decentralized manufacturing. We don't think having a $100 million gigafactory works well in this space, where you have to ship millions of square feet, millions of tons worth of a product, thousands of miles. Therefore, we believe in having this localized, hyper-localized approach, not even regional, a hyper-localized approach, almost like a last mile solution. So that's one. 2, we don't believe in changing the end product. The further you deviate away from what a standard home is, what, say, a top 20 production home builder is building, meaning you're innovating around materials or pre-cladding walls with MEP and shipping those walls, or a volumetric box, etc. So the further you deviate away from what is recognized today by trades as a traditional home, the harder it is to have incumbents adopt that system, and the harder you're running uphill against the regulatory red tape that exists today. Folks forget that building a house is a highly regulated space. There's compliance, there's inspectors that are pretty boring and don't want to change the way things are done. So pillar number 2 for us is don't deviate away from norm. So we're innovating within the confines of a box, meaning we want to go deceptively look like traditional construction. Built on site, very much recognizable home, different sizes, layouts, finishes, etc. Pillar number 3 is around cost, which is, I think, the most important thing. To date, industrialized construction it's been hard to make hard cost work day one. It's about speed and potentially quality controls, but it's never about true hard cost reduction, because no one's been able to do that yet. We're trying to. We told ourselves we won't go to market unless we can solve for being around $100 a foot in self cost to the factory. So that's important. Now, to dive into your question, it's hard for your audience, I think, to visualize without physically seeing. Imagination is one thing, but I'll try to describe what our mobile microfactory is. It's about 40 shipping containers that are shoved to the brim with our equipment. I call it OEMs, different machines, different, basically stations and assembly lines shoved into containers. Those containers come together. They form a rectangular perimeter that's about 30,000 square feet. And those containers, they essentially are single level, let's call them, when they form the perimeter. And we inflate this pneumonic structure on top. It's like a tennis court, like a bubble structure. It's non-pressurized. But what that allows us to do is we have a constantly repeatable system that's a non-permanent structure, meaning we don't take 4 to 7 years to go build a factory. We don't need to change it every time. It is the same blueprint, which matters for the software, which we'll get into a second. But we quickly deploy these stations out of the containers into different, call it assembly lines. And what happens inside the factory is one of two things. So it always feeds, whether it's a localized or non-localized supply chain, pretty standardized, none of it is proprietary. It feeds about 600 line items, so 600 different SKUs worth of materials. And what happens inside is one of two things. One, will produce things from scratch with those machines, meaning we'll make things like windows, like helical piers for the foundation, certain framing elements. We'll make even pier panels, like non-structural wall elements, so sandwich panels that are pier and galvanized steel coils. So like there's things we'll make from scratch as a raw input to finished good. And everything else we take and we prep. So sheetrock, PEX pipes, cabinets, toilets, etc. Doesn't make sense for us to make, but we can take those in as inputs and prepare them so there's no, let's call it messy thinking work done on site. But the idea is we basically break up a home in 37 stages, call them pallets, and we palletize those 1 and 2 inputs, and we send them last mile down the street, where on site we have unskilled labor putting together those kit of parts with tools that also make their way on site, with bathroom, showers, lockers that are available on site because we've containerized them as well. That's essentially the system. But from a home perspective, really standard home. There's probably two things that are irregular when you compare a home to like a Lennar home. We use steel and rivets for structural framing elements, and we use sandwich panels for non-structural enclosures, so the walls. That's it. Everything else is pretty normal.
Very interesting. So the concept is the factory is operating and those materials then are immediately going to the job site a mile down the road or whatever, where they are then being constructed by unskilled labor into a home. Is that correct?
That's correct. And all that is driven by kind of hardware is two things. It's the kit of parts, which deceptively looks pretty standard, but the way it comes together is meant to work with unskilled labor. It's the hardware that builds those kit of parts. And then it's kind of like, the software, which is the operating system, or like all the salad dressing on top. Okay. So that's really what the software does. Is it's everything from in-house like HR payroll to all the way dispatching software to send the kit of parts to different construction sites in the right manner. It's the instruction manual behind building systematically the kit of parts in the right order, etc. So the software matters quite a lot too in this process.
Okay, very good, very interesting. So, how many homes could a typical factory produce in a day?
What's interesting about us is if anyone follows the CHIPS Act and some of what, Biden has put forth around funding massive factories, typical factories for anyone that doesn't understand manufacturing, you could be $25 million, you could be 50, or you could be 5 billion. The beauty of our system is we figured out how to launch factories for about 10 million bucks, which isn't a crazy amount for a factory that will do 200 homes worth of output per year, about 430,000 square feet. From foundation to interior finishes, because that's important. We touch every aspect of a home that ties to the vertical build, which is foundation to finishes effectively. So 10 million in CapEx to do about 200 homes per year.
So 200 homes per year. I'm not sure how to ask this question. That's going to be roughly one every 2 days or 3 days or something. Is the erection time on site about the same? I mean, you wouldn't be able to put these together that quick, would you?
No, so it's just about output. So
gotcha.
We're at about like 30. We're about 60 to 90 days today. The goal is to drive down to about 30 days. We want our bottleneck to be bureaucratic, not tied to our physical capacity or the technical side on Cuby. We want it to be, an inspector being late.
Yeah, waiting on an inspector, all that type of stuff. Oh, very interesting. So do you have any factories up and running right now at this time?
Yeah. So listen, we're probably at our 1% mark, given where we're trying to go. So we're still relatively early, but relative to being early, we've now done about 400,000 engineering hours. We have a relatively big team that's constantly working to de-risk the technology. In 4 years, we were able to design all the systems, test and build all the machines. We've put up a manufacturing facility that makes the machines. We've put up our first mobile micro-factory. It's our first of a kind. So we've gotten pretty far. We're just starting to get to commercialization, meaning our business is more akin to McDonald's. We're not interested in being a developer. We're not interested in stepping on the toes of your audience who happen to be home builders. We're McDonald's. We want to give the system to as many kind of local hands out there as possible. So we're just commercializing. We have our first sites on our first 2 sets of contracts, one in Las Vegas, another factory going to Denver. So those would be like our first 2 commercial efforts.
Very interesting. Well, I love what you're doing. And yeah, I mean, I just want to see you go hog wild with this. I think it's a very cool concept and neat thing. So, I guess I was thinking in terms of what radius would a factory cover, but it literally would be there just to create the home development that's a mile down the road or whatever.
No, not necessarily. We service a 150-mile radius.
Okay.
You pick the right location, you can be operating for 10 years. You pick any dot on a map in the US, there's thousands of homes that can be absorbed. That's the type of housing crisis we're in. So it could, potentially work with a, Howard Hughes type or like Hughes Corporation, like in theory. It could be a master plan development over a couple of phases, or we could just plop up somewhere in Las Vegas. Las Vegas needs 86,000 units at the moment. And we're only 200 of those units more cost effectively a year. So in theory, you could be operating for 10 years out of the same location.
Sure. Gotcha. So how do you kind of quantify how the numbers stack up? I mean, what is the impact of a Cuby factory on the labor shortage?
Yeah. So for your audience that isn't familiar with home building, to build a home in the US today probably takes somewhere from 7 to like 14 months, depending on who you are, where you are,
Sure.
et cetera. It involves 22 different fragmented, disjointed, and not always aligned subcontractors. And it takes, a lot more people than it takes us today. And I don't quantify people, I quantify labor hours. So I think a home today will take like 7,000 labor hours, whereas we're trying to build a home in 2,200, 2,700 labor hours, something like that. From a dollar perspective, quantifying that, I think the statistical average of building a home on the hard costs in the US is somewhere around $154 a foot. That's a 2021 number. I don't buy that number for a second. That's maybe skewed by the top 10 home builders. Anyone we talk to is nowhere close to that number,
I would agree.
especially on the coasts, right? Maybe in Texas. So relative to that number, the way we enter a market is we look at what an average cost to build is for Bob Smith, the home builder, and we say, okay, let's come into that market. Let's be incentive enough for you to want a factory, to know that the way we build is going to be cheaper. And what's that right number? We think it's like a 20% discount to where they are today. Our margin is between where that number in terms of conversion happens versus our number, which is about $100 to $110 a foot to build on the self cost, on hard costs of kind of labor on site, labor off site, plus the material costs. So it's a significant delta to where it costs to build today.
Very interesting. So how many factories would you see Cuby being able to potentially put out a year? You say right now we figure we're maybe 1% of what we eventually could be.
We're in this phase where we have 2 really good supportive partners. They're risking a lot working with us. And we're, really, it's really great that we're working with them because they're going to be their own off taker. They're going to smoke their own supply. They're going to put up a factory and they're going to consume all of its output. We're good on our first 2. We need to execute. We need to test. In Toyota's production system, this is called Kaizen, constant improvement and iteration. But the goal and the end goal and where kind of we want to end up is 275 mobile micro-factories. at least half or at least 60% of those will be in the US. The rest in other first world countries where labor is an expensive part of the build process. We're far from that. It's going to take 7 to maybe 12 years, something like that. Let's call it 10 years. But we want to just get those two done, and then we can start batting a lot more.
So let's say I'm an investor out there or maybe a home builder, and I'm thinking, gosh, this Cuby stuff sounds pretty cool. Love to put in a Cuby factory. Can you kind of guide us through what that process would look like for someone that approached you and said, hey, help me make this happen?
Yeah, so I think, we constantly get inbound because I think we're, the first ever to go productize the factory, right? I don't see a lot of for sale factories white labeled to folks. That's kind of what we're doing. Folks reach out to us all the time. It's a bunch of back and forth conversations, building trust, learning about their business. They learn about our business. And at the end of the day, we've never had a no. It's either, sure, let's take the risk together. You're early on in your process. I want to be a first mover, or it's call us when your first or second or third one is up and we want to be next in line. But we've never gotten a no. The value add is there. It's just a matter of someone's risk profile.
Well, I love it. Well, this has been a great conversation. We really have covered a lot in a pretty short amount of time, which I kind of like that. But we're kind of close to wrapping up what I kind of call the business end of things. Is there anything that we haven't covered today that we didn't think to ask you that you would like to share with our audience?
No, I think this is thorough. If anyone has questions, our website is a good way to reach us. I'm sure there's a lot more technical stuff we can cover, and you don't want 4 hours of me ranting, I promise.
Well, I know I love what you've done, and gosh, you're a young guy, and amazing that you put this all together. Now you've got a business partner, also. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think it would be really a disservice to put trust in your audience and potential, or really put trust in me for your audience and your potential customers that could flow our way. My partner Oleg is the brainchild of all that's technical on the side of our business.
Okay.
He spent 20 years building hardware and scaling that hardware in a lean manufacturing type way. He has a great book about scaling deep tech teams. His Bible is the Toyota's production system. So this is his bread and butter.
Very neat. Good stuff. Well, before we close out, we always invite our guests to do something that we call our rapid fire questions. These are 7 questions kind of from out of the blue. Alex would have no idea what we're about to ask. Are you up to the challenge of rapid fire?
For sure.
Great. Well, Ryan, you want to alternate asking questions and you go first?
I would love to. Question number 1. If you could eat only one type of cuisine for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I live in New York City. I think for most people, that's sushi.
Very interesting.
Gross.
I don't know if I could eat nothing but I love sushi.
I know you do. I know.
Don't know if I could eat nothing but sushi, but good stuff. But you got lots of it out there on the East Coast too. Good stuff. Question number 2. What is a product or a service that you have purchased recently that was a game changer for you? Sort of a, where has this been all my life moment?
It's in theory purchasable, but I was an early tester of it. So I think I'm still riding a bit of the demo, let's call it that. But a friend, he's become a friend after I demoed it, started a calendar service where basically anytime I want to schedule a meeting with someone, I CC this bot at blockit.com, and it handles all the scheduling on my behalf, interacting as if the opposite party is interacting with my EA, like a physical human EA.
Mm-hmm.
Set up a meeting nearby coffee shop, propose times, coordinate if someone says, oh, I need to move this. I don't touch, the email chain after that. I probably countless hours saved, countless. I probably could not live without it.
Absolutely. You say that's bot at blockit.com?
Yeah, block it, like blockit.com.
Very good. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, me too. All right. Question number 3. What's the best piece of bipartisan advice you've ever received?
It's funny. Yeah. Okay. So I was just in DC. What I realized is housing is a bipartisan issue. No one really cares what side of the spectrum you're on. Everyone realizes that housing is worth the pursuit. So the advice is talk to everyone in the public sector about housing.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, but you're right. It is completely bipartisan. Good stuff. Next question. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would you choose?
Elon Musk is controversial this day, and I don't think he's a historical figure, but he would make the list. I think it's inspiring what he's done for kind of progression. I think we've stalled a little bit for the last 50 years. So it's interesting to see someone that inspires other folks like us to go do really big things and solve really big problems. So I think that would be high on my list.
That's a good one. Absolutely.
That's a popular answer we hear here.
It is. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it just the guy challenges us all to think of, hey, how different could we do this?
If you want like true historical figure, I think it would be awesome to interview like some of the or like have dinner with some like the great industrialists, like the Andrew Carnegies of the world, the Henry Fords. I think it would be really interesting to have conversations with those folks.
There's an interesting book out that actually another guest on the show had recommended once called Freedom's Forge. And it's about the industrialists during World War II and how they came around supporting the war effort.
But the only reason we won the war, right, is because all of our industrial capacity was shifted toward, we were just able to produce more weapons. And that's that's the big debate right now. This is why venture capital is backing the private sector in defense, is because we've stepped so far away and stepped into kind of China producing everything for us. So we couldn't turn on this industrial base even if we wanted to in a critical time. It's actually a big national security issue.
Yeah, it's interesting. That book really drove it home for me. Great book.
Well, I'll read it. I've heard the recommendation. I'll definitely take a read.
Cool. Ryan, your turn.
Okay, next question. What is a bucket list vacation destination for you?
Very fortunate. I've had an opportunity to travel a lot in my life. My wife as well recently, like we travel a lot. But I think what's next on the list, because all destinations that you haven't been to should be dream destinations. I think next on the list is Chile.
Oh, nice.
The Atacama Desert in Chile.
We have a couple of roofs in Chile and some interesting stories of those getting put on also. Next to last question. What is one book that has had a major impact on your life?
I think Sapiens is really interesting. I think like the history of humans is just generally fascinating because I think history definitely repeats itself.
Very interesting.
Okay, final question here. At the end of your days, what would you like to be remembered for?
I think Oleg and I my partner Oleg and I have a shared vision. We want to be the people that have built more homes than anyone else in our lifetime as kind of single individuals.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Well, Alex, thank you again. This has been great and very interesting, and I've learned a lot, and I appreciate it, and I know our audience will enjoy it as well. So for folks in our audience who would like to learn more or get in touch with you, learn more about Cuby Technologies, give us some websites and ways they can do that.
Yeah, perfect. So just our website is great. The submission link goes, I get CC'd on that. We're pretty hands-on, so happy to chat with anyone that wants to learn more.
Very good. And we will put links and things in the show notes as well for our audience, so you can get some direct links there. Well, thank you again, Alex. This has been great.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
And thank you to our audience. Oh, I need to remind everyone, we did all work in our challenge words. I almost forgot that. Ryan, your word was?
Bipartisan.
What you got in there? You kind of changed one of our questions to work it in. That's kind of your trick. That's your specialty.
Yeah.
Alex,
easiest way to do it.
Your word, Alex, was?
Salad dressing.
Salad dressing. You got it in there really well. And I had hog wild. I'm not real pleased with the way I worked it in, but I got it out there. So.
I didn't even hear hog wild.
You did it? Oh,
I did.
I had a really hard time not laughing when you said it.
What was the context? I gotta so I'll have a chance to re-listen to this. So I'll look out for it.
Oh, well, a little bit of fun. Hey, thank you so much to our audience for tuning into this very special episode of Construction Disruption with Alex Gampel of Cuby Technologies. Check them out. They're doing great stuff. Please watch for future episodes of our podcast. We always have great guests. Don't forget to leave a review. Until next time we're together, keep on disrupting and challenging, looking for better ways of doing things, just like Alex says. Don't forget to have a positive impact on everyone you encounter. Make them smile inspire and encourage them. God bless and take care. This is Isaiah Industries signing off until the next episode of Construction Disruption.
This podcast is produced by Isaiah Industries, manufacturer of specialty metal roofing and other building products.